Hello, and thanks for joining us. Today we're also joined by a stock deadbolt. We picked this deadbolt up a couple months ago. She's still 100% stock. We've ran it a couple times. Just been having fun with it. Great little truck. Question you might ask though is, why do we buy another deadbolt? We have a deadbolt here. If you've been following along, you've noticed our Project Cheap Bolt, where we've been building a cheap bolt here and there on a kind of a budget build. Well, here's the reason why we picked up another deadbolt. A, we love the SCX platform. In my opinion, the deadbolt's the way to go because of the cheap price. These retail for $300. You can pick them up from Tower, use a coupon, get to $50 off, knocks it down to $250, get free shipping usually on top of that, so $250 to your door. You get an SCX ready to run, throw a battery in it, good to go. Right out of the box. Waterproof speed controller, couple little shortfalls here and there that need addressed, but nothing major. For $250, you leave you $50 left over. You can throw a different body on it. You know, you're going to upgrade the links anyway, more than likely, so you can change the wheelbase if you wish then. Just a great all-around deal. Okay, enough rambling. What are we doing with the deadbolt today? Well, let's remove the body, and I'll tell you what our plans are. Okay, here we have the deadbolt. And the problem with the deadbolt is the battery goes back here in the back. But we'd like to have the battery up front, because you throw a nice big 3S in this, it puts a lot of weight, especially a lot of weight back here. There's a lot of weight up high. I personally like my battery mounted crossways right here. But the owner of this one just wants it mounted up front for right now. So what we're going to do is we're just going to mount it up here using the stock battery tray. We'll remove this here and move it up here. Normally whenever you do this, you can leave this radio box in place. But we are also going to remove that today because the owner wants a waterproof Traxxas box put in. The problem with this box right here is it's a decent enough box, but where the wires come out of the box here, Axial has not sealed that. So water can get in there and destroy your receiver unless you have a waterproof receiver in there. So, like I said, we're going to remove this box. We're going to throw in a Traxxas waterproof box. We're going to mount it back here. Because of the way the wires come out, we can't mount it to the sliders. Okay, so how do we move this battery box up here? Well, first we'll start by unbolting it. We'll unbolt the tray and this frame. And then you'll have to go to your parts bag. Should be a bag like this in with your SCX whenever you get it. You will need this parts tree right here. The reason why you need this parts tree right here is for this bushing right there. Also in there is a bag that should look something like this. And in it, there's two of these little round pieces like this. These will go right here in the back where the stock radio box is. And the other little one will go up here up front on this little nub. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to remove this battery tray in the back. Okay, we now have the battery tray removed and its little brace thingy that goes underneath of it. We will set these aside, and now I'm going to go ahead and remove these two screws up front here for the radio box. Like I said, right now though, I'm going to go ahead and pull this radio box on out, but you don't have to. You can leave it in there, it works just fine. The thing is, since I'm taking this out, where I said before you need this little spacer right here, you will have to trim it down just a bit or use a smaller spacer like one of these front ones right here. Alright, let's move on to the radio box. Okay, we now have the radio box out of the way. And now it's time to put in the battery tray. First we'll start by putting in this hold down. And I want to show you a couple things first though. To put in this hold down, you will need to get some screws. You'll need two of them like this one that are at least 1 inch long. And you'll need one of them like this one that is about 5/8. They can be a bit longer, but that's like the bare minimum you need. Just don't go too long. Okay, now I also want to show you something else. Now, whenever I move the battery tray on an SCX there's this little bar right here. It's part of this mount right here. I do not like the way it rubs the servo lead whenever the suspension compresses. It wiggles the end of the servo right here. So what I do is I take a pair of side cutters and I cut this bar out. Just that little bar right there. You'll be fine because there's still material in here and over here to hold everything in place, and it's not like it's under a lot of stress. Now you can take this bar out to cut this off, or you can leave it in the truck. Either way is fine. Just try to get as close as possible when you cut it. Okay, there you go. You can see we got it all cut out. Now something I will do now is where the servo lead came up like this before, I will run it underneath this bar and I will zip tie it to one of these suspension links here to keep it from moving around too much and to keep it from getting caught on anything. Because since the receiver box will more than likely be back here, that way allows me to run the wire down the side here. Okay, let's get that battery tray mounted. Okay, I want to show you something here real quick. This is the mount you'll normally use in the back here where the stock radio box mounted at. But since I'm not using the radio box, I don't need it to be quite as tall. I'm going to use these two little mounts right here. These came off of the sprue right here that has this big round thing in it. The reason why I want to use these is put together, they're not quite as tall as this piece right here, but they still allow for full suspension compression. So let me get this mount two of them on top of each other, repeat that for the other side, and there you go. Let me get these mounted and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, now here we see the battery tray mounted down. Use the stock location mounting points back here, the forward ones of these four, and up front. As you can tell, I have that little pin underneath there. Now whenever the suspension compresses, down here we can see it, you can see there's barely any clearance between the servo and the battery tray. But there is clearance. That's perfect. Allows full suspension compression. And there you have it. Now what we got to do is mount the tray to it. Up front here in the stock location, that's where we'll use that 5/8 screw. It'll go down through the tray and into the brace down below, and the rear just uses the stock screw that you took out to start with. It's that real short one. One that looks like that right there. So we're almost done. Let's move on and get this mounted up. And there we have it. The battery tray is fully mounted and moved up front. Fits very nicely. So everything goes back together very well. You can do this job in just a matter of minutes really. You have everything out and ready. 15 minutes to be done. If you're leaving the stock radio box and speed controller in place, they fit right in here with no problem. But like I said, we took them out, so now I need to make a mount for the waterproof Traxxas box and for the speed controller mount too. So let's take care of that real quick. Now it's time to mount our electronics. To do this, I'm going to make a tray to fit back here, our plastic card. It'll house our waterproof receiver box and our speed controller. To start with, I made a template out of a side of a cereal box. This template fits perfectly here in the back, and I've located my holes for the screws to fit down through to mount it to the stock locations where the battery mount went. Now what I'll do is I'll take this template right here and I will transfer it to this piece of plastic card. This plastic card is reasonably stiff, but to make it stiffer I transferred the template twice. I will cut out two of these and then I will glue them together. That way it should make it nice and stiff. So let's cut those out real quick. To cut these out I will use a metal straight edge and a razor blade. Just cut them out nice and square. Like so. My lines might not have been perfectly square whenever I drew them on there, so now they're nice and square. So now we just snap off the excess. Put my one down the middle, like so. If I cut these right, they should be about even, and they are. Now what I'll do is I'll take my template, lay it on top of one of these, and I'm going to mark where the mounting locations are. Like so. Through the holes that I put in the cardboard. And there they are on the plastic card. Okay. Now I'll just take and drill these holes out of the top one. Then I will glue it to the bottom one and drill the rest of the way through. I now have both pieces glued together, have my holes drilled in it, and we will test fit it into place. Perfect. Okay, now what I'll do is I'll just take this outside, shoot it with some flat black paint, and bring it back in and be ready to install it. To install this, just go through your extra screw boxes, find just some screws. You can use the ones that held down the stock radio box into place. They're these little short fellers like this. Just take 3 of them and screw them on down. So let's go throw some paint at this. I have this Traxxas waterproof receiver box laid out here. I am using part number 5624. This is the one for the 2-wheel drive Slash. It's a great little receiver box. I like it because, well, it is waterproof, but there is some assembly required. And I do want to show you couple of things that I do to it. Whenever I take this out and get it all ready, I will not be using these mounting locations on the bottom. So what I do is I just push the screws up in them to seal the holes, and then I will take some liquid electrical tape and cover the screws on the bottom and on the inside. I don't want to take any risk of water getting in. So let's smear a little bit of this on there. Do the inside first. Just enough to cover the hole. And the good thing is this covers up the sharp edge of the screw too, so you don't have to worry about it maybe accidentally poking a wire or something like that. Okay, there we go. The inside is done. Now just dab a little bit more on. I'm going to flip it over here and do the screws on the bottom. Like so. Putting enough on there to fill the hole. And like I said, this way I don't have to worry about water seeping in or anything like that. And if I ever do mount this in a location where I will need those screw holes, I can peel the liquid electrical tape off. Takes a little bit of work, but is easy enough to do. Now we'll just set this aside. It will dry pretty quickly. And then we'll be ready to put our receiver in it and mount it on the truck. Also on the receiver box lid here, there's this little clear spot on this. I believe it's for the stock Traxxas receiver light to flash through. I am a little paranoid of water getting into places, so I will also put a little dab on top of it, just to keep water from maybe seeping through whenever this truck's buried up past its headlights in water. Now that the paint is dry, we are ready to mount this radio tray into the back. Just using a random assortment of screws left over from where I took out the stock radio box and the battery tray from earlier. And then all we'll do is just line these up and tighten it down. This won't take but just a moment. I'm not tightening them down all the way yet. I'm just loosely putting the screws in to make sure everything lines up good, and then I'll tighten them down. Okay, 2 of them are in. Last one. Put it in right here. Now, granted, honestly, you could probably just use the 2 screws here in the middle to hold this down, and you don't have to make this this radio tray this long. It's just, I prefer to have it this way so you have more room to mount stuff, such as electronics, because eventually this truck may get a BEC in it, a winch controller, all that fun stuff. Okay, there we go. Tighten them all down. The only thing to do next will be to mount the receiver box to it and the speed controller. And here's a better look at the radio tray all mounted up. We have everything is dry and ready to be installed. So first thing I want to do is install the speed controller. Before I put some servo tape on the back of it. Let's peel that away and we'll mount it right up here next to the transmission. I'm mounting it forward because even with the case around the receiver, the speed controller is a little bit heavier. So put that little bit extra weight forward. I say every time I do this, I want to trim these corners, make them rounded. Yeah, I forgot to do it again, but that's okay. Now that that's mounted, I will put down my base to the receiver box. And just peel off the servo tape. It's being a little stubborn there. There we go. Slide it in here and put it up as close to the speed controller as I can get it. Try to leave just enough room to get the cap on. There we go. Okay, now we have the receiver box mounted down. Okay, now that we have the receiver box bottom mounted down, it's time to put the receiver in it. But first, you got to feed the servo wires in. And after I seal up one of these boxes, I don't like the idea of opening it up again because you have to grease the seal. So I'm going to go ahead and put in these short servo extensions, and I'll plug them in the receiver. I've labeled each one so I know which channel they go to. And this way, if I need to unplug, like say, the speed controller from the receiver, I can just unplug it here without having to unscrew this box. So first things first, let's go ahead and feed these through. They have to come through from the end that plugs into the radio. The other end is just too big to feed through here. Once I have those fed through, I'll pull them on in a little bit more just to give me some slack. And this way I can go ahead and plug them into the receiver, making sure I plug them in the right numerical order that I have them separated out here. Here's our little tactic receiver that we're using. Let's start at the bottom. Put number 3 into number 3. And then comes number 2. Followed by good old number 1 at the top. Once I have all 3 of them plugged in, I will check to make sure they're nice and tight. Now, granted, right now I don't need the third channel, but hopefully soon we'll add a winch to this truck, so I went ahead and plugged it up so it'll be ready to go when the time comes. Some people say you don't have to servo tape these to the inside of a radio box. I believe, honestly, yes you do, because I don't like the idea of the receiver possibly flopping around. Just fold this down and stick it right there. One thing I do love about this tactic receiver is its very, very small footprint. Okay, now we're ready to install the covers. If you look closely, I've already got the O-ring here in place, but I've got a light bead of grease around it and a light bead of grease around where the wires go across this foam sponge. I use my marine grease. It does come with this Traxxas grease, like I said, but I prefer to use my own grease just because I've had good luck with it in the past. And this also helps hold the O-ring in place. I've also greased the cap for the top and the one that goes across for the wires. The one for the wires goes on first, so we'll go ahead and install it. Now it's time to put the top on. Make sure whenever you put the top on that there's a little hump on the front side of it, that it lines up with where the wires comes in. Once you get it in place, drop the screws in the hole. And then we just tighten it down. Now we got it all together, we'll just take a paper towel here and clean up the extra grease, any grease that squirted out. And now all that's left is to hook up the wiring. Now we got it all mounted, we will go ahead and wire everything back up. Earlier off camera, I went ahead and moved the wire clamps from the other side of the chassis to this side, so we can run these wires right down through here. And that's where it comes in handy earlier where I numbered them. So we'll hook up the steering. Now comes the speed controller. I will have to zip tie these wires up later, and that's okay. And the winch one, we'll just tuck it back here out of the way. Okay, the motor, let's hook those up real quick. And now then we'll just neaten everything up. And here we have the wiring all neatened up and sorted out. Everything going to its place. The receiver box and speed controller living happily on that rear deck now. And the battery tray placed up front. This should help the Deadbolt climb better, and should just make it overall a better trail truck. And now we don't have to be afraid of those little puddles we find along the way because the receiver is safely tucked away inside that box. Thank you for following along as we did this little upgrade and updating to our Deadbolt. Hope maybe you picked up some useful tips or tricks along the way. Maybe you have some suggestions or comments. If you do, post them below. And I'll make sure I read them and answer any of them I can. And if I can't answer, maybe I can find the answer. What are we doing next to this deadbolt? I don't know yet. And hopefully it'll be something entertaining. So make sure you subscribe so you can follow along. And while you're waiting, go ahead and watch some of our other videos. Maybe you'll see something there that interests you. Thank you for watching. And until next time, happy RCing.